What's the plan with Damon Williams?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars, I got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. We're going to be talking about if this is the best time for Washington's bye week. We're going to get into if this is a fluke or maybe a bad sign for Steve Belichick's defense. But we got to start with something that we've seen a lot over the last couple of days, where Washington is now 4-3 following that really ugly loss at the hands of the Iowa Hawkeyes, who shout out to a whole bunch of people in the comments in the postgame show saying, hey, you guys need to give more credit to Iowa, Iowa was a fantastic team. We didn't want to sound like anything we said yesterday was not, was saying anything otherwise, because Iowa was fantastic. They were more physical. They were better than Washington in every single way on the field. And a lot of people have looked at that and they've said, all right, it's time to turn to Damon Williams, where it's time for him to start, time for him to do this. And Lars, I think I speak for both of us when I say it's not time for that yet.
No, it's not, but we understand the call for it. I mean, I guess we'll keep a little bit behind the curtain here. Take two on this show. On my flight back from Omaha to Seattle, I'm like 800 words into a story about basically this exact same thing, but but expanding on, right, because again, what else is going to be said in the bye week besides, hey, why not give Damon a shot? But here's the thing. So Damon went into that game, I think he had 16 or 18 pass attempts, somewhere in that ballpark, and basically doubled it at Iowa. That was not the plan. To be clear, that was, as Jedd said 2 weeks ago when I asked him, he's about to play 12 snaps per game roughly, which is kind of what he's been at. He's actually been about 11. So he had a career high in every statistical way, except for he tied his career passing touchdown for a single game, which is great. But the problem is, if you expand that out and you just say we're turning it over to Damon, there's too many ramifications, and I'm going to break them down here. One, you brought in a fifth-year transfer in Will Rogers, who actually kind of was almost semi-inherited by Jedd. But the problem is, what was Jedd's pitch to him? Hey, would you rather go find another school or play in an NFL offense if you want to play in the NFL? Okay, right. If you're going to make that sell, whether it's to a high school freshman in Damon Williams or Will Rogers, you have to back that up. And so you can't just throw Will aside halfway through the season.
So I agree with you on that sense, because, where you look at that and you can say that could dissuade a lot of transfers that Washington might need going into 2025 from coming to UW. Where you can look at that and just say, hey, this is a guy who set a whole bunch of records in the SEC. He played 6-7 games at Washington, played well, and then all of a sudden they just cast him to the side. Where we love Damon. We think Damon can have a really long, really successful career at Washington. None of what we're saying is meant to be a knock on that in any way, shape, or form. But that's one thing that needs to be considered. And I think another thing in this is, but that's kind of beneficial in terms of Damon's long-term outlook, is we've seen Will improve week in and week out, which is a testament to Jedd's coaching and testament to Jedd as a position coach, as a quarterbacks coach, along with Jimmy Doherty, shout out, who they've done a really good job of developing both of these guys. We've seen them improve, which is great. And it's not time to just, I don't want to say throw the season away, but to just say it's time to move on and time to look toward the future, where if we get to the UCLA game and this is in a similar position, yeah, for sure. Different story. You can look at that and say, all right, little different now, but with what Damon has shown, it's nice to see him because he's still being used in all the right ways and all the ways that you want to see him be used, where Jedd has no problem leaving him in on a 4th down against Iowa, leaving him in to pick up a big 3rd down against Michigan, where he's come through in those spots, which is nice to see. But it's something where you still want to have him on a bit of a learning curve because you have Will in front of him. It's not, I mean, the best reference I can make to this is, as a New England Patriots fan, it's not Jacoby Brissett and Drake May, where it's, how are you going to keep trotting this guy out there every week when you know what's behind him? That's not the case here. This is a guy who, coming into the week, was second in the Big Ten in yards, had thrown 1 interception, thrown 12 touchdowns. It's a very different case. And with Damon as well, do you want to throw him into the fire at Indiana, at Penn State? That seems like too steep of a learning curve for anybody.
You know what? Actually, you make that comparison in the NFL. It's kind of like Geno and Sam Howell, where Geno,
Sure.
yeah, is Geno the great guy who's going to win you a Super Bowl? Is Will Rogers going to lead you to the college football playoff? Probably not. But my word, is the difference between him and the guy behind him? Are you just going to throw it to him right now? No, we liked him on in the future. The Seahawks like Sam Howell in the future. I don't know why, but again, point being here,
Different conversation.
Right, but the point that I'm making with these kind of comparisons, because
you're right, yeah,
because it's also kind of a fair point to say, hey, it's not the Patriot system, but it's more kind of like the Seahawks. So when you look at Will, and also here, I'll give you a crazy stat why I think you still keep Will as a starter, because look at the Indiana quarterback. Him and Will basically have the exact same stats. The only difference, maybe the quality of coaching, maybe some coaching decisions that are made and other players around him, and then you can factor in your offensive line, whatever you want to say. But even that's more to the point where if you're going to throw, are you going to throw Damon behind this line who hasn't necessarily, now again, I understand he's more agile than Will. I understand why people want to just say, hey, well, he's more electric. Maybe we can win a couple more games. Do you think you'll beat Penn State with Will Rogers or Damon Williams? I think you play both, obviously. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying as a starter. Like if you just said, hey, we're going to roll Damon Williams out against Penn State in Happy Valley. That's, again, I'm not saying, we both believe in Damon. So again, much like people saying, hey, Iowa was good. No, Damon is good. I just think for what Jedd is doing, if you're truly saying, hey, we want to set up and build this, Damon should be permanently learning behind Will and growing each week, which he absolutely is. But that doesn't mean replacing Will in any manner of fact, barring injury.
Yes, no, that's absolutely it. Where I feel like you and I, just in terms of Twitter, in terms of the comments, we've seen everything from give it to Damon to have them, rotate like what they're doing with DJ Lagway down in Florida, where there are a whole bunch of different things that it seems like are out there in terms of ideas. And it feels like the role that Damon is in right now is the one that's best suited to him, where he's still getting those plays in key situations. When he's got the momentum, Jedd will stay with him for the most part. That's nice to see. That helps. And then it's, we saw it a little bit more in this last game, even before it got out of hand with all right, he's going to, take a go ball down the sidelines. He's going to throw a whole lot of different routes, which he did so and did so effectively for the most part, even after, on that last drive where I liked what Jedd said in his post-game presser, where he's like, yeah, I don't care how much time it takes. I want to see you execute us all drive. And Damon did that. So it's nice to see him do that in spurts, but putting it together is a much bigger, much tougher ask. And it feels like with a lot of the other guys on this team, to just kind of take it back to the transfer portal point, where it feels like it almost sends a message where, a lot of the fifth and sixth year seniors, where it says, what does it show them? What does it show Carson Bruner? What does it show Cameron Fabiculanen? What does it show all these guys who stuck around to just all of a sudden say, hey, yeah, we know that we're, playing for a bowl game. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that. And it's your last go round at this point. And you stuck around, you stuck through this, but we're going to go to the complete youth movement right now, where I talked about the rotation of young guys, which still feels necessary. You think about in the backfield, you think about Kamori House at linebacker. I think about, somebody like Peyton Waters at safety, some of these other positions where it's still necessary, receiver with Rasheed Williams, Audric Harris, those guys, where it's still necessary to show that you're willing to play young guys and get them into the system. And they're still doing that with Damon. It's just not at the point yet where it's, Sam Heward in 2021, where it's all right, let's turn the reins over to him completely and see what this looks like.
Exactly. And I think it would also kind of, I don't want to say it would shell shock him on, because I don't think, first of all, you remember that third down read that he decided to keep when it was like Jonah could have got the first down, or it was either Jonah or Adam Muhammad. I can't remember who was the running back. I was almost pretty sure it was Jonah, but Damon decides to use the full cojones and keep it and ends up gaining 12 or 17 or something.
Oh yeah. Fantastic play.
So again, it's like, I totally can understand the call, but at the same point, it's like, if Jedd is truly meaning what he said after the post game, which is, hey, we're building for the future, but we're still respecting the present, you can't do anything but keep the status quo. And yeah, I truly don't think anything would be different if you flipped it, where, okay, let's say Damon goes in and starts and throws 3 interceptions in the first half. Are you then going to say, hey, Will, we need you again?
Right.
No, you're not.
There's too much where, just to kind of put a bow on it, there's too much right now to say he needs a bigger role. There are too many other variables at stake, especially, as you said, with the offensive line. But Lars, speaking of variables, there are a lot of different things that went into the defense's performance on Saturday. Was it a fluke, or was it a sign of something worse? We'll get there right after a message from our friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role in any given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the hiring process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So Lars, as we look at this defense, couple of numbers throw at you here. Even after that, I don't know what proper term to use. Let's just say stinker. The stinker of a performance of 323 yards allowed, which is shockingly high for the Steve Belichick defense, and 40 points allowed. Washington is still number 9 in the country in total defense and number 18 in scoring defense. This is still a really solid defense. So was the game at Iowa a fluke or a sign of things to come?
Yes.
All right.
Because here, I'll show you a crazy stat. Washington by 0.7, so 0.7, basically splitting hairs here, still ranks higher in the Big Ten in scoring defense than Iowa after that gong show this past weekend. So still, relatively speaking, in a grand scheme of things, when you look at this defense, no, you're not overly concerned, except in a couple of key areas, particularly at the right before halftime, probably in the minute, 2 minutes before halftime, really a minute, but we'll just say 2 minutes before halftime, where the Wazoo game, the Rutgers game, for different reasons, and now the Iowa game, big run plays that either resulted in scores and or touchdowns. Well, one or the two. Also, shout out to Washington's defense for allowing a Big Ten high 11 field goals. The irony there we will not get into right now with Washington as it stands with these special teams. I just thought that was funny to throw out there because, again, it speaks to this defense does force more field goals than touchdowns.
Right.
It's basically it's almost an even split right now. I think it's 12-11. But the point being, it's like, that's not a cause for concern because we know it's a bend, not break. Make sure you keep everything in front of you. The problem is we haven't necessarily seen the turnovers, and some of those problems are still persisting kind of week to week at this point. And again, I know now we can talk about Javon Parker hasn't been there, so that is significantly worth noting. That is, again, if you have him and Sebastian, and again, Jacob Bendis, shout out, had a really good game. Again, not probably his best game because I think he's had a couple others, but that was a really good showing he had against Iowa. But it just didn't seem like there was the depth behind him that we thought there would be. And then you compile that with the turnovers that resulted in short fields. Iowa had like 1-play drives or 4-play drives that resulted in touchdowns. So they didn't have the total yardage because they didn't need to. They were just stuck on one play. That's the problem.
So you're absolutely right. The things that, the interior defensive line depth is something that was concerning to me, where it more so than the talent, it felt like the rotation wasn't there. Where we've seen Logan Sagapolu really develop. Like we really have, where that's something over these last 2 games. I've been impressed with how much he's grown. I don't think he's all the way there yet, but his growth has been really impressive. But, I wrote about Elenius Davis before the Iowa game. We barely saw him. We didn't see much of Bryce Butler. And that's where I'm a little bit more concerned and confused is, all right, where's that defensive tackle depth? Where the bodies seem like they're there, but you don't want to use them because we've seen them produce. We've seen them step up when their number was called. So that's something that I'm a little confused by. The one thing that I don't know how to dissect, and it's really tough because we knew this was coming in terms of Iowa's offense. Like that's one thing. We knew what they were doing. We knew it was coming. But even more so in terms of Iowa's offense was Caleb Johnson. We knew it was coming with that guy. We knew exactly how Iowa wanted this game to play out, and they played it out perfectly. A lot of that deserves, just you need to shout out Kirk Ferentz. Fantastic job. He runs a really good program. He's done a fantastic job with everything in terms of that. And the way that the game script fell exactly the way he hoped it would is just credit to who he is as a coach. That's why he's in year 26 there. But you can also look at that and say, all right, Steve Belichick, who's shown to be a really nice game planner, really, really top of the line game planner in terms of, defensive coordinators in college football. The fact that, you knew it was coming and you couldn't stop it. I'm a little more concerned when it comes to the tackling, where I don't know if I want to look at that and say, all right, that's a Caleb Johnson issue, where, if we're looking at all the running backs in the nation, I feel like he has a really good argument to be the number 2 running back in the nation behind the dude who's doing what Barry Sanders couldn't do in terms of his numbers right now. But so I don't know if we want to look at that and just say, yeah, that's what it was, or if it's more.
Well, crazy as it was, like looking at the PFF numbers for tackles, like not as bad as I thought it would be. Everything else is bad, but the tackle,
Sure.
but it kind of did seem like it was more so the timing, which has kind of been Washington's. If we're talking about Washington's identity, their timing has been terrible this year. Because if you talk about that one long run that Caleb Johnson had, where he bounced off 6, 7, 8 tackles, like
at least,
that was a problem. But there was more or less like it just kind of seemed like it was daggers, not necessarily death by 1,000 cuts. And so it seemed like really pointed moments where they always kind of seem like they're in position, but then not always making the tackle. So I agree with you that there's kind of a tackling concern, but it really more or less is about the depth. Where Logan Sagapolu played 17 snaps. Linus Davis played 11. Jacob Lane played 5. Voight Tanupi got a lot of run, and we both like Voight, but I'm kind of wondering maybe upon second thought, as kind of we said after the show, we're like, hey, you know what? Let's dissect this. Let's rewatch the show, rewatch the game, see what actually might be different. I kind of think Durfee's absence might play a little bit more role in that. Just in
100%.
the sense of,
that's something I want to get into a little bit later. Sorry to cut you off. That's something I want to make sure we get into a little bit later, where first of all, I want to give a shout out to Voy. I know we've done it a couple times, but the way he's improved under Steve Belichick has been awesome. Where I know that's something you and I have talked about, where shout out to Deshaun Lynch. He came in with a really nice game plan. Deshaun played really well, I think, in this game. But I think, especially with the Zach thing, I think that's a great point. But I think it's just more of you didn't necessarily get out schemed or out coached, I want to think, in terms of Iowa's offense versus Washington's defense, which is, I think, where the question arises is you just got straight up outplayed, where they said here's what we're going to do. We're going to run the ball down your throat. And then it's here, try to stop it. And they still couldn't stop it, which is where I don't know if that's something where, especially when you look at, the USC offense or the Oregon offense, even Penn State, they put up 23 points, but they were solid against USC. You look at those offenses and that's without even saying Indiana, who in terms of numbers is the best one on that list. Without saying all that, this is what you have to go up against, where if you know what they're going to do, are you going to be able to stop it?
I think because you're not necessarily. I do agree that Voy and Logan and a lot of these guys have improved, but I will say, and I tweeted out a couple of times, on both sides of the line, but I'm specifically going to talk about the defensive line here. Bo Stevens literally almost seemed to pick up and throw Wagon Sagapolu.
That guy's amazing. That guy is absolutely incredible.
So I think, this was a real, I don't know if it was a wake-up call, because again, Jedd Fisch and Steve both know how the physicality is in the Big Ten. They know what's like. Yeah. They knew it wasn't like, oh wow, we're really shell-shocked here. But I do think there was kind of going to be a cultural lag, for lack of a better phrasing here, going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten in terms of, are you able to this year, right? I mean, there are a couple of teams, and I know there's one team down south that Washington plays at the end of the year that kind of proved late Saturday night that they actually kind of already are built for that. And I think that's going to be the test for Washington.
They also got aided by the worst clock management I've ever seen, but that's a different discussion for a different day.
No doubt. No, but I'm just saying, being able to hang in a slugfest like that shows your physical.
For sure. Right. No,
Washington's proved against even a lesser Iowa team with Cade McNamara, quarterback. We both love Cade. Shout out to Cade. But again, that's mostly Caleb Johnson getting the credit on this. But it starts in the trenches. It starts with being physical. And what does Iowa produce besides tight ends?
Linemen.
Exactly. Plenty of things, to be clear. But
right. But this is where the discussion comes into play, where even because it's one of the things that we liked about Washington coming into this game, where we talked about even Michigan, certainly dominated the pass rush at times, but it didn't seem like they were ever super more physical than Washington, where you look at this Iowa game and on every single play, it's, oh yeah, Iowa is going to out physical you. That's where the question comes in. And what makes me worry, but also, with 2 weeks with the bye coming up, where I also want to say, all right, I feel like that's something you can coach in the next 2 weeks now that you've seen it, now that you've gotten a taste of what that is.
Exactly. And I think Jedd kind of already knew, even going into the Iowa game, because he talked about it with special teams, or look, we know what changes we need to make. We're not going to make wholesale changes game week. We'll do it in the bye week that's coming up after this game. It's kind of the enigma of the season where, look, we know what we have in the future. We still got to play this weekend. So, we'll figure it out when we get that. But it's a good sign that Jedd's got a plan, but also got to execute that plan, which has been the struggle this entire season.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with you there, Lars. But let's get into the bye week because it really couldn't have come at a better time. But we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters up the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is great news for any sports fans in the area, whether you want to go see Husky football, Husky basketball, the Kraken, the Seahawks. There are so many great deals that you can find on Game Time, because Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. With their all-in pricing, you can toggle this feature to show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And with seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So, Lars, this bye week couldn't come at a better time. I know I've said that a couple times already, but I don't care because we can't say it enough. When we look at the injuries to Sebastian Valdez, it was nice to see him play. He played well. I didn't have any problems with his performance. You look at the injury to Zach Durfee, which has kept him out for a second time now this season. And even Jedd Fisch was like, yeah, we're really waiting for the bye week with him to give him some time off. He really needs it, which is probably a big reason why he wasn't able to play on Saturday, where it sounded like he was having some trouble with what Jedd said was a toe injury over the course of the week. So that part of it is all, factored into this. But at the same point, it's also, you look at just the way Washington played in that game, and you could tell that a bye week was sorely needed.
Exactly. I mean, you could almost kind of run down the list. You're talking about, you're not getting the Parkers back, but you could get Quentin Moore back. You could get, which is good offensive depth, and you get Durfee back potentially, which is good. You're getting a starter back on defense, and then on top of that, potentially Kevin Green and a few others. But really, the other person that we kind of need to talk about here, since Jedd seemed to be like beating around the bush here, is Jonah. I guess, if we're really worrying about balancing his workload, I guess at this point, like, it's not the worst thing that Jonah going into the bye gets 9. So it's like, look, you know what? We're not going to use and abuse him. We already know 31 times we lost the game, whatever. And I kind of, in the moment, I was like, really? You're not going to go down swinging? But then I'm like, you know what? Actually, respect. Because again,
sure.
How many college coaches could say, Mike Gundy's like, hey, my punishment for my running back is I'm going to make him give you 50 carries a game. Okay, shout out to Jedd for not using and abusing him. But in the same vein, then he needs to use this week to get healthy. Maybe, if he can get a couple practices off just to rest the body or whatever, because you're going to need Jonah if you're going to hang against Iowa, USC, Penn State, Oregon. I'm not going to mention the other team in that because they should win that game. But I'll leave you to figure out who I didn't mention there. But it's one of those where, it's.
You didn't mention Indiana technically because you said Iowa, but
I thought I said Indiana. Oh, okay. I meant Indiana, but yeah, no, I was leaving off UCLA. But the point is, it's like, get everybody as rested as they can this week. Really, I think the scheme kind of should be I'm assuming we'll find out more from after we speak with Jedd on Monday. But when we find out what his plan is for the bye week and how he wants to structure it, kind of like, do you use more practice heavy, get more physical, or do you the rest, go more scheme, which I think is actually going to be the plan and should be the plan.
So I've got a Locked On Huskies bold prediction here. I think we're going to see an NFL style bye week where there's not going to be a lot of in-facility stuff. And, I know it's super bold with considering how Jedd talks about the NFL all the time, but in terms of there's going to be film, there's going to be all those things, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of, on-field workout, things like that in terms of after we talk to Jedd, because of where the team might be in terms of some of the injuries. We're getting Quentin Moore, I think, is one of the biggest keys in all of this, where I think when we look at Washington in terms of what they want to do in terms of the downhill running game, I think not having him really limits sometimes the way that Jedd might want to use Jonah or call plays for him deep in the red zone, where I don't think Jedd would ever admit that, because part of that is just the hand he was dealt in terms of the roster. We're coming in super late. He didn't have an opportunity to bring in a lot of guys to position. Obviously, losing Charlie Kroll was tough, where, yeah, he's a true freshman, but he looked like he could be, an impactful blocker. Ryan Otten not being healthy doesn't help the situation either. But then with Quentin, where, no disrespect to anybody else in the room, but Quentin is light years ahead of all of them as a blocker. Or that's what he's always been. That's what he was when he got here in 2021, where I think that has not helped the offense in the red zone. I think it's, just dissuaded them from a whole bunch of different things, to the point where they're putting Voit Tanufi out there on offense. And I think Voit's look good when he's been out there as a fullback or whatever else he's been doing. Shout out to him for that. That's awesome. But I think that a lot of the injuries and a lot of these little things are what really need to be solved moving forward. And getting as much time off as possible this week is going to be really helpful for that.
No, and I completely agree, but I think it almost kind of doubles down on the focus, which is, okay, how do we scheme this up better? How do, with these guys back? Because I think really it's what we're going to talk with Jedd with on Monday, where he said previously a few weeks ago, almost about a month ago now, where he's like, oh, I don't evaluate my play calling. That's what you guys do so well. Okay, bet. We have evaluated, and now you got some questions to answer, because some things keep repeating. And again, now some of it, did Will miss a few throws? Sure.
100%.
Did Damon miss the check down to Jonah in the Apple Cup? That was terrible. But again, we're not going to harp on those handful of plays, because again, when you look at the ball placement that Will had to Denzel in the fade, it's like, yeah, exactly. Alley-oop, exactly what we expected. But you can't replicate that. Is that on the players or is that on the coaching? I think we both know where the answer is on the latter. So that to me is the question, where can Jedd look himself in the mirror and say, you know what? I will remain the play caller, because again, for people asking me that, I've been asked that too many times already. Jedd will not relinquish play calling duties.
Yeah, that's
period.
Just
End of discussion. We're not going to ask it, because I will tell you the answer. If I can tell you the answer, not going to happen. So, what can he do to improve? Because I think he's very smart. We both know how much of a savant he is when it comes to scheming up an offense, and the yardage is there. Most of the indicators are there. The final result is not there, both in field goals and in touchdowns. As Jonah told me after the game, we need to score more points. We need to end drives in touchdowns and not field goals. And for that really gets back to the coaching. Now, again, we can say the offensive line, the penalties and all that. But again, everything comes back to coaching. Now, again, unless let's say the same player has that penalty 5 games in a row, well, the coach should have pulled him after the 3rd game. It still always comes back to coaching, no matter what. That's
just a big point of college football as a whole, is a lot of this is coaches who are, working with these players who, for the longest time, 9 times out of 10, they're the best player at their high school. They're the best player. So you don't necessarily need to always have this insane level of, technicality or this or that. That's what the college coaches are there for, to develop them and continue on their football journey to get them to the next level. And that's why you need to harp so much on the coaching. So I like what you're saying. I'm sorry. Please continue.
And Jedd, we're going to double down on this, because you're selling the NFL. You're selling coaching you up to be in the NFL. You have an NFL defensive coordinator, the son of an NFL head coach, as your offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. You got talent galore to do it. It's not like there's not enough brains in that room to figure it out. But it's like there's been too many times where, and I know, again, you're talking about they're 4-3, right?
Yeah, 4-3.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm just missing a game. This whole season's been weird. It's like, I swear to God, I'm missing a game at some point. But so again, we're saying 3 losses. Okay, you're still have a winning record. But again, the reason why Jedd took this job was because of the resources available, what Washington meant coming off a national championship to maintain a sustainable program moving to the Big Ten. So this is what you came to Washington to do. Now on you to do it.
Right. And that's, like, it's something I'm ready. I wrote about over on Huskies Wire a little bit, where Jedd had I thought it was a really good answer about how his vision is there and how he's setting things up for the long term. And it's very obvious when you look at the numbers, when you look at some of the things, but it hasn't been executed perfectly yet. And of course, part of the execution will obviously fall on the players on the field. But at the end of the day, the execution and all these things, all these little things that you say, oh, I want this, I want this, I want that, that comes back to you making sure it is perfectly drilled into your players' heads.
like Giles getting the touchdown against Wazoo. That was the original plan, and you overthought it. Now, again, I'm not going to harp on that, but it that's why we say coaching. Where, yeah, again, should the players have executed that block better? Maybe, maybe not. But for instance, we're going to go back to, because if that was your got to have it play that week, whatever you got to have it play was against Iowa was non-existent.
Right.
And that means we're falling backwards as the programs are going up. Because again, Wazoo and Iowa, don't hit me for certain people saying this, Iowa's up here. Like, there's a little bit of a gap. Just in terms
I don't think
like,
anybody in this fan base at least is going to hate you for that take.
But it's true, because you know how physical Iowa is. So you knew what was going to be the task. How quickly can you coach that up? And now, again, we're not expecting 10-2. We're not expecting a playoff berth. We thought 8-4 was in the cards. It was. Kind of fumbled out a little bit. 7-5 is still very much on the table. 8-4 kind of asking a lot here. But, 7-5, 6-6, 7-6 with a bowl win. You're good. You're winning. You are winning. That's the whole point. And year one, with all these close losses, you go into year two with DeMond having 150 plus snaps, maybe 4 or 5 passing touchdowns, a couple of rushing touchdowns, with Will still being the starter. You are in a much better trajectory than throwing caution to the wind and saying, yeah, there we go. We're going to just do all this now.
Right. Lars, that feels like a perfect place to get out of here on. As always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everybody who's tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Our guy Craig Sheeman puts the Big Ten first when everyone else overlooks it. You can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever else you listen to your podcast. And with that being said, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post new videos. You got any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.